going through, or continuing going through the prospectus this morning. We had started this last week with the overview for convention and then the President's Report or Committee number 1, which includes the President's Report, the Board of Education Publication Report, and a couple of other smaller parts of the prospectus. My plan is for today to go through the Board of Regents Report and the Board of Missions Report, and if we have time, we'll go through the finances, the Trustees Report, but we'll see how much time we have going through that and how many questions there are. I'm going to begin this morning with prayer. Since we're going to be going through the Regents and the Missions Report, I've chosen a hymn that involves our proclamation of the gospel both in our schools as well as in our witness throughout the world. We begin with prayer. Spread, O spread, thou mighty word, spread the kingdom of the Lord, wheresoe'er his breath has given life to beings meant for heaven. Tell them how the Father's will made the world and keeps it still, how his only Son he gave man from sin and death to save. Tell of our Redeemer's love, who forever doth remove by his holy sacrifice all the guilt that on us lies. Tell them of the Spirit given, now to guide us up to heaven, strong and holy, just and true, working both to will and do. Up the ripening fields ye see, mighty shall the harvest be, but the reapers still are few, great the work they have to do. Lord of harvest, let there be joy and strength to work for thee, till the nations far and near see thy sight and learn thy fear. Amen. All right, so the ILC report starts on page 53 in your prospectus. I'm going to hit some of the high points, some of the things that will be brought up for consideration. A lot of the things that are in the reports and the prospectus are more for informational purposes. There are statistics and there's information about enrollment at ILC. There's information about individuals that are staff members at ILC. So there's a lot of background information. But then there are a couple of things in each one of these reports that are actually intended for the convention to act on. And those are the things that I'm going to try to highlight just so we have an idea of the things that the boards are requesting feedback or information on. So a couple of things at the very beginning of the report. The first page 53 is their devotion. And then on the top of page 54 you have the enrollment sheet. This kind of gives you an idea of what enrollment looks like for the last few years and then what they anticipate the enrollment will look like in the future. When we get into the trustees report, there's something that you'll notice, and it's something that the trustees are concerned about, and it's something that ILC is concerned about, and that is that the number or the amount of subsidy needed to support ILC from the CLC has continued to rise. And so when that number continues to rise, then it obviously brings the amount that is needed for the CLC general budget up. And that can't just continue to balloon higher and higher. So the trustees want to keep that number at approximately the rate of inflation, which is between 3% and 4%. And that number has been much greater than that over the last couple of years. Now, the offerings to the CLC general budget over the last few years have been extremely high and over what we've anticipated. So we've been able to cover that. But there has been some concern about whether or not that can continue to go on with that rate going forward. So the regents have a couple of suggestions, and they're going to test the waters with that this year. The biggest factor in reducing the subsidy from the CLC to our Emmanuel Lutheran College is the amount of tuition. And a number of years ago, the convention capped how much they can charge for tuition because they didn't want tuition to continue to go up and up and up and up, and then what happens is when tuition gets too high, then people stop sending their kids to ILC and then you have a bigger problem. So they think that they have a solution to that, and that is that we have basically 3, maybe 4 divisions of our students at ILC. We have the high school, and then you have the teaching and pre-thee programs, the education program and pre-thee. And the AA program, which is those are individuals that are going through a 2-year program to get basically a secular degree so that they can go on to something else in a secular field. And then you have seminary. So 4 different areas. And we have very large endowments in the CLC that support the preaching ministry. So that would be anybody that is in the pre-thea program, going into seminary at the college level, in the teaching program, or in seminary. In fact, because of these large endowments, the actual cost that students are paying today to go through college and seminary, if they're in the teaching and preaching program, is less than what I paid when I was in school. And that was 20 plus years ago. So these endowments are really helping students to be able to go through. And what's happening is that, so if you're familiar with an endowment is a sum of money, and they take the interest off of that sum of money, and they use that for grants to the students. You never get to the principal. And so you pull all the interest off of that, and you make that available then for the students that are going through and working to go into ministry. Well, we haven't been using all of the interest. So the interest then that's left over goes back to the endowment. It builds the endowment higher, which is a good thing. But they're saying, we have this money left over, we might as well use it. So what they want to do is they want to raise the tuition of the seminary students and the college students that are in the education and pre-thea programs, because they can pull more money out of the endowments. So it raises the amount that ILC is getting for tuition, but it's not becoming a burden on the students. Does that make sense? So that's one of the things that they're going to try to do this year. They're suggesting to the convention. They think that will help a couple of different ways. Number one, the students are still getting the education for the same price that they were before, so they're not raising tuition, but it is giving more of an income back to ILC. Now, if you think about the number of students that are in those programs, it's probably about 12. So let's say you raise the tuition by $500 a year per student. Do the math. 10 students, you're talking about $5,000. That's not going to be a significant change in the budget amount. But this is sort of a litmus test that they're trying to see how this works. And if it does work, then they might be able to do other things in order to assist. They're talking about possibly an endowment for the high school level, which is where the bigger tuition with room and board and everything is, in order to reduce those numbers. So that's one of the things that they want to test this year, and long term, that could be a help with our overall budget and with the tuition at ILC. So are there any questions on that? It's a little bit of a complicated process, but.
Is there any analysis of why that cost is just going up? Is it if it's going up greater than the rate of inflation?
The big reason is because of lower enrollment at ILC. And they've done all kinds of surveys over the last 6 to 10 years on why the enrollment at ILC is declining. And most of those statistics are coming back, or surveys are coming back, saying cost is not a factor. Most of it is distance. But the bigger issue is that we have less children in our Christian day schools. And since our Christian day schools are closing, and we have fewer of them, and we have fewer students in them, you have less students to go to ILC. So if you look at the majority of CLC congregations, most students that don't go to a Christian day school don't go to ILC. The majority of our students that are at ILC are products of our Christian day schools. So with fewer Christian day schools, we have fewer students going to ILC. So really one of the key factors is building up our Christian day schools so that we have the students that are going to ILC in the future. Any other thoughts or questions on that first point? One of the big things that is going to come up related to ILC is the Committee for Partners in Public Ministry. They set up a committee. This is because of the lower number of called workers. We have fewer and fewer, we've got more and more gaps in our teaching program, or our schools, and in our pulpits because of not enough pastors, not enough teachers to go around. And so the Committee for Partners on the Public Ministry have been trying to get the information out, let people know, hey, we need pastors, we need teachers, think about going into the public ministry. And there again, you have the same problem with lower attendance in our Christian day schools. 98% of all of our called workers in the CLC are products of our Christian day schools. 98%. So as our Christian day school enrollments go down, again, the factor is that we have less called workers that are coming into our churches and our schools. So the Committee on the Partners for Public Ministry have suggested a couple of other programs in order to get maybe people that are second career individuals to go back to ILC, but not to go through a 4-year program or 7 years of seminary in order to be a pastor or a teacher. And they want to have some sort of a program available to get people into the pastoral and teaching ministry in a shorter period of time, rather than through the entire 7-year, 4-year process. And so that's going to be one of the things that's going to come up at our convention. There's been some debate between the seminary professors and the committees on for partners in public ministry as to the wisdom of that. We've had a couple of programs like that. For example, we have the, I forget the title of the program, the Limited Ministry Program, I think is what it's called, the LPM. And that has been in existence for 50 years, and we had one individual that went through that program. And it was basically a shorter, condensed ministry program that would give somebody, they would graduate, they would be able to assist in the ministry, they wouldn't be a full-time pastor, but they would be able to, with assistance, serve a congregation sort of as a lay pastor, so to speak. And so the committees on the Partners for Public, that's a long acronym. The CPPM have said, obviously that program isn't working, we need to come up with a different program that's going to get people that are going to assist in our pastors and teachers. So that's going to be something that's going to be discussed and talked about. They have a, let's see, the pages are pages 88 to 92 in your prospectus. There is a report that was given by the CPPM. And this kind of lays out what their suggestion is. So they have the committee report 88 through 92. And then there is also in the Regents report, there is I think it's in here, let me see if I can find that. There's also a response from the seminary professors to the
69.
69? Thank you. Yes, there is. Bottom page 69 through 71. There is a response from the seminary faculty to the report of the CPPM. And then there's another report that's not in your prospectus. It was sent out after the fact, and I can give a copy to anybody who would like it. It's a 3-page response from the CPPM to the seminary guys that is saying, well, here's some other reasons for going this direction. So there's some back and forth between the CPPM and the seminary professors. So that is going to be something if we have anybody that's on ILC, and we don't have anybody here at Grace. But that committee is going to be discussing, I would guess, at length, the CPPM report and the response by the seminary professors. Part of the concern has been we want to have seminary-trained pastors that have Greek and Hebrew background. We understand the benefit of all of that. One of the arguments has been today there's a lot of technology that's available that was not available 20 years ago, 30 years ago when I was in seminary. So, for example, you can go online and you can get almost any of the Greek and Hebrew resources that I learned while I was in seminary. It's available online. So the necessity of actually going through and studying the Greek and the Hebrew in the way that I did isn't as necessary today as it was back then. So there's so many more resources available. So that's one of the arguments that the CPPM has, is that those tools are available in a lot of other ways that they have not been in the past. Any questions on the CPPM or the idea of changing? One of the other issues that has been discussed is that in order to make one of these programs work, it would be more work on our seminary professors. They would either have to make classes available outside of regular class time, or they would have to do things during the summer. They would have to teach classes during the summer. So that's one of the other issues too, is that it's extra work on our seminary and college professors, either during the school year or during the summer. And the question is that, what are the ultimate benefits? If we get more pastors and teachers as a result of that, is that an investment that's worth it or not? That's going to be the big question. Any other thoughts or questions on the CPPM? The other big thing that's going to come up for the ILC report is at the end of your prospectus, pages 93 and following. This is a little bit deceiving because the ILC, the Regents Committee, is taking this up. It's the proposed new building at ILC, but the Regents really have nothing to do with this at all. I'm going to give you a little bit of background for this. I forget which year it was that we built the academic center, but that was built and we had a very large loan from the CEF to build the academic center. And we received a $2.5 million bequest to the ILC building fund that paid off the mortgage and had over $1 million left over that was intended as seed money for another building at ILC. And this goes back about, I suppose 20 years ago or so, when they established a long-range planning committee at ILC, and they said, this is the first building that we need to have, this is the next stage, this is the next stage. So it went out, I don't know how many years. This is the anticipated building progress that we want to see at ILC. So we did the Commons, we did the Academic Center. The next thing on the list was a new gymnasium or multi-purpose building. And so the Long-Range Planning Committee began to function. They established a committee to look into this so that we would have a report ready for convention. And what's in your prospectus is their proposal based on the Long-Range Planning Committee of years ago. So the plan is to build a gymnasium. If you look on page 95, you have an overview of the campus. At the top of the page, there's a little blue box right in the center at the top. That is the boys' dorm. And then if you go down to the side of that to the left, there's the current existing lower parking lot. And then directly below the boys' dorm, you have, it says on the sheet, proposed chapel. That is the current gymnasium. And then below that, connected to it, is the current Commons building and kitchen, dining room, etc. So those three things are existing right now. Off of the lower parking lot is a big blue square. That would be the proposed site of the new gymnasium. And it would in essence be a two-level structure. If you've ever been at the campus, you'll realize that that spot is in a hole. And so the gymnasium itself would be basically on a ball field, where the ball field is now, but it would have an upper level that would come out at ground level where the Commons and the gymnasium is. So it has above it what's called a mezzanine that would be open to the gymnasium above. You would come in at the second level, look down on the floor below, take the stairs down, and you could go down to the lower level, is the idea of that. So, and then you'll notice that below the gymnasium, then they also have a new parking lot that would be added in as well. So, and then the existing ball diamonds, there's going to have, since the site is where a current ball diamond is, one of those ball diamonds has to get moved over, and that's down below, sort of below where the amphitheater is at this time. So if you flip a couple of pages, 96 and 97 have a design of what this would look like, the upper and lower parts of that, and then 98, 99 give you a little bit of a landscape view from the side of what this would look like. Page 99 gives you an idea of the two-story design. This would be, the top of page 99 shows you coming in at the lower parking lot, and then it would have the upper mezzanine above, so it kind of gives you an idea of what that would look like. And then if you flip to the next page, it shows you the changes. So what would happen is when we move the gymnasium out of the current gymnasium and into the new gymnasium, the current gymnasium would be remodeled into a chapel. And then on pages 100, at the bottom of 100, and then the top of 101, you have a picture of what the chapel would or could potentially look like. So the numbers are on page 103. The estimated cost of this project is $6.5 million, which would be the largest project that ILC has ever undertaken. Part of that is inflation, but part of it is also the size of the building. So what they have is a proposed funding mechanism at the bottom of page 103. They said they're going to start with the $1 million balance that we have from the bequest that's sitting in the bank. They're suggesting that we sell off some of the 80 acres that we have on campus down below Lowe's Creek. There's a whole bunch of land that is inaccessible to us because it's across the creek. And there have been people that have wanted to buy that from us over the years. They're saying that that is worth between $250,000 to $400,000. So they're suggesting selling that off in order to get the profits to go back into the building program. They're anticipating $750,000 of additional contributions to the building fund. And then they have the two largest mechanisms are at the bottom, a $2 million CEF grant and then a $2.5 million interest-free CEF loan. And you'll notice that the estimated mortgage payment there is at about $7,000 a month, which is less than what the mortgage payment was for the academic center, which is about $8,000 a month over the last however many years. So the big question on this is going to be, we asked the trustees about this at delegate conference yesterday. We're not sure that the CEF is capable of funding a basically $4.5 million outflow, because there'll be $2 million which would be a grant. It would be literally taking the money out of the CEF and giving it away in essence, and then another $2.5 million grant. And right now, the cash balance in the CEF is a little over $3 million. So in order to make that work, we would have to have a large influx of money into the CEF, and that would actually increase the liabilities of the fund unless it was a gift to the CEF. So there's some questions as to whether this is even feasible at this point. But that's so the regents have not been involved in this at all. This is the planning committee that has put this together. The regents haven't really been involved at all, but it is, since it relates to ILC, it's in the ILC committee's purview to discuss and come back with a recommendation on this. So are there any questions on the building project? One of the questions that I've heard is, it's $6.5 million for the gymnasium construction, but you might have noticed if you looked in here carefully that they actually don't know what the cost would be of remodeling the current gymnasium into the chapel. They say that it could be anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million. So that's a big difference in funding. And so a lot of it depends on what you're going to do with that. And I think there's going to be some people at convention that are going to say, come back with something firm, with something that shows us what the chapel could look like and a number for that before we make a decision on this. Because there are some people that have wanted a chapel at our campus at ILC, and some people have said the chapel's more important than the gymnasium. So there is going to be, I think, some discussion and some debate as to whether this is the best use. Even though the Long-Range Planning Committee years ago had suggested this, is this the best direction for us to go as a church body right now? So
maybe there would be other things too, and that is maintenance, extra electricity, and all the things that go with maintenance. Is going to come up too, which we're already finding.
And that was one of the things that the Board of Regents have been concerned about too. You know, what is the additional cost long term in order to have a building like this? Generally, when you do build new, your electrical, your maintenance cost goes down, at least immediately. But in this case, you still have the existing building. You're just repurposing that, so you're not replacing an old building like we've done with the academic center, where we tore down the cottage, which had absolutely no insulation in it, and Ryan Hall, which wasn't very well insulated, and Northwest Hall, which used to be a barn. So there was a big cost factor economically as far as maintenance with a change like that. This is going to be a little bit different because we're still going to have the gymnasium, we're still going to be using it just in a different repurposed role. So
Has the increased price of building materials been a factor?
no, this number was, I believe, come up with before the spike in building costs. Now, that is mentioned in here. There are several aspects of building construction materials that have spiked. Part of that is just raw lumber. The other part of that is steel. And this would be a steel building. So they anticipate that those spikes in building costs would affect this number. And there's debate as to whether or not, how quickly those numbers, most of the experts are saying the numbers are going to come down. Some are saying it might not be for 2 years. So this number might not be a firm number either. They're going to have to go back and get some new numbers on that. Any other thoughts? I think that's most of what there is for ILC. There is something else in the ILC report, but it's going to come up under another committee's report, so I'm not going to bring that up now. But any questions that anybody had if they were reading through the prospectus on ILC? Okay, let's turn to missions then. That's on page 40. It starts on page 40. Again, I want to try to hit some of the high points that are going to be coming before convention. There's a lot of information about our current domestic congregations, our foreign mission fields, and things like that in the prospectus. But a couple of things that the Board of Missions is asking for direction on from the convention. One of those is on the bottom, page 44. At our convention 3 years ago, as a result of the increase in the general budget and plenty of money in what we call the reserve fund. So if you're familiar with the reserve fund, you'll see this in the monthly reports that we get from the CLC treasurer that goes in our bulletin. The reserve fund is the money that we bring in over the top of our expenditures every year. And so when you don't spend as much as you take in, that rolls over then into this fund that we call the reserve fund. And that has been sitting at over $250,000 over the last few years, and it keeps going up. And so as a result of that money in the reserve fund, the last convention in 2018 said, we want the Board of Missions to be able to use that money to call a third foreign missionary. We've been talking about the need for a third foreign missionary for a decade now. We have the money to do that, so let's do it. But what happened is after 2018, we issued, I think, 3 calls for missionaries. Those were returned. And then we had the problem with Peter Evenson in India. He wasn't able to get back into India. And we didn't want to call a third foreign missionary when we didn't know what we were going to do with the second foreign missionary. So finally we were able to reposition him in Togo. And about the time that he got settled into Togo, COVID struck. So we didn't call during the period of COVID, so that postponed everything for another year. And so we were thinking, okay, we could go back to calling again, but a lot of things had changed, and so we decided to come back to the convention and just get permission once again to call a third foreign missionary. And so on the bottom of page 44, there was also some questions about the funding mechanism that was offered at convention in 2018. And so the Board of Missions worked with the Board of Trustees to basically hammer out a schedule of funding and what that would look like. And that will be proposed to the convention as a go-ahead. The Board of Missions wouldn't call a missionary until things had settled down with COVID. We were assured that we could get a missionary overseas somewhere. So that would be the next step. We'd still have to wait just a little bit. Some places like in Asia are again going crazy with COVID and many, many deaths. So it's just going to depend on where things are from the world perspective with COVID, deciding what we do with that. So that will be one thing that the floor committee for missions will have to consider. On the, just above that page, there are two new things. These are not going to be needed action on, but the foreign mission coordinator and the Christian school instructor supervisor are two positions that the Board of Missions has created in order to help with our work overseas. The foreign mission coordinator is basically going to work with all of our, not just our missionaries. We have 2 full-time missionaries and 2 part-time missionaries, and then we have a whole lot of other pastors and teachers that are assisting with contacts with various people all over the world. So what happens is when you have 10 or 12 people involved in all of this, it's a little bit chaotic. And so the idea of the foreign mission coordinator is to be able to have contact with all of these individuals that are working with our foreign fields and bring that information sort of in a unified report to the Board of Missions, so that we aren't grabbing information from all of these different individuals that are serving our, some of them are just taking people through classes in Sudan or in Burma or wherever they happen to be, and it would be just coordinating not only the information that's going out, but also the information that's coming in. So that's part of the idea of the foreign mission coordinator. And then the Christian school instructor supervisor is basically helping the teachers. We have 2 schools overseas. They're like a Christian day school, but they're in foreign countries in Kenya. And we have teachers in those schools, and we want to make sure that those teachers are well-grounded in Christian doctrine so that they can teach Christian doctrine in these Christian day schools. And that means they know how to teach Bible history, they know how to teach the catechism, they know how to give a good law and gospel devotion, and then teach the other teachers that this is what a Lutheran school looks like. So this has been our way of trying to help maintain Christian doctrine in those schools that are in foreign countries. But one of the problems has been we've seen a lot of turnover in the teachers over in those schools. And so sometimes we just wonder, with that kind of turnover, what is the consistency in Christian doctrine that they're getting in these schools? So any questions on 44? Yes?
What does that mean? You're experiencing a lot of turnover of the teachers.
Just so there's quite a market in, it seems like in Africa, where our Christian day school over in Africa, it's sort of like our Christian day schools here. Our teachers don't get paid what secular teachers get paid in their schools. And so what happens is that usually you'll get a young teacher that will come in and they will teach at our schools over there to begin with. But once they get a year or so and they get a little bit of experience, a lot of times they take a better paying job in a secular school. And it's very different over there because their secular schools are not quite the same as our secular schools. They're much. There's a major difference between our Christian day schools and secular schools in the United States of America as far as what they teach. But that's closer to being almost the same in Africa. So they don't have the problems in their secular schools that we have here in our country. And so that plays a little bit of a role in the fact that they go to another place because they can make more money, or maybe it's a more prestigious area. The places where we have schools are very, very rural. They're not in a nice town, things like that. So it's hard to be a teacher in some of those areas. So we think that that's part of the cause of the turnover in those schools. Any other questions? Okay, let's see. The other thing on the Board of Missions is on page 50 and the top of 51. A couple of things related to kinship. The Kinship Committee was established, Dad, you can probably help me out, was it 1984?
By Senate
1984, okay. So 1984, the Kinship Committee was established. The original acronym for Kinship was Kids in Need, Seeking Help for India's Poor. Well, since 1984, fast forward to 2021, so we're talking about close to 40 years, the convention has regularly added more and more responsibility to the Kinship Committee. So we have broadened, by convention, action, and resolution, the responsibilities for Kinship. So it's no longer just in India. Back in '84, the only mission, well, we had missions in India and in Nigeria. Now we have them in many countries all over the world. Not only are we helping the orphans, or maybe even widows, but now we're helping seminary students, and we're helping with well, orphanage, they're not exactly orphanages, but orphan care in various ways. And so a couple of things have happened. As the work of Kinship has grown, we have added more individuals to the Kinship Committee. The problem is that we found out that there was actually a convention resolution that limited the number of members that could be on Kinship. And so that was done not realizing that we had a convention resolution. So basically what the resolution is in our convention, now that we know this, we're asking for two things. We're basically asking the convention to eliminate the mandated makeup of the committee so that we can adjust the makeup of the committee as needed based on additional convention resolutions that change the work that the Kinship is doing. So that's a big part of all of this. And then you'll also notice that part of this is the removal of the term project. When it was established in our Constitution, it was called Project Kinship, and that was because it was a really little thing. It was one little project in India. And now it is no longer just a project, it is an entire operation. And so we're saying that removing the term project fits the work that Kinship is doing better. So we're just going to call it Kinship. And the acronym that has been suggested is changed, that's listed in here too. Kids in Need, Student Help, International Partnership. So we can keep the acronym, but just with a different meaning. Because Kinship is something that's well known in our midst. We wouldn't want to come up with a new acronym and say, well, what is that thing now? We keep the acronym Kinship, people know what it is, but it has a different meaning. And I would guess that most people, even the ones that have been around since 1984, may not have realized what the original acronym for Kinship meant. So that's only a small handful of people that actually probably realized that it had to do with India specifically in the core. So any thoughts or questions on the Kinship change?
Give you an idea of how the responsibilities of Kinship have gone. We started with a budget of just zero, and now we're $150,000 budget.
Yeah, it has changed drastically. And again, it's important to remember that it hasn't changed because of the Kinship Committee or even the Board of Missions. It has changed because of convention resolutions that have been passed over the years, broadening its scope and the work that it is responsible for. Any other thoughts, questions on missions? There's a lot more information in there on some of the things that are going on. I'd encourage you to read through it. The Mission Board report goes from page 40 to 52, so we got close to the end of that. But those are the big things that the Board of Missions Committee will be focused on next in a couple of weeks. We can quickly just hit the highlights. Actually, I might go to elections. Elections is one of those committees that doesn't have as much to do. So that's committee number 7. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but the Committee on Elections, basically, they're involved in taking nominations from voting members of the CLC. So last week we talked about the different boards that we have, and then we have the presidium and all of these elected positions. Well, those change either every 2 or every 4 years. So every 2 or every 4 years you have to have elections to replace individuals on those boards. And the election committee takes the nominations and then they go through an election process over the 4 days of convention in order to elect individuals to those boards and positions. So there's not a lot I can report to you on that because I don't know who all the nominees are going to be. Those will be reported at convention. But there is one thing that the Elections Committee is going to be tasked with again this year, and that's the question of when to hold convention. Years ago, it used to be that convention was held from Monday to Friday. And about 3 conventions ago, there was probably 4 conventions ago, there was a resolution to move convention over a weekend to see if we could increase our lay delegate participation, because our call workers were outnumbering our laymen in representation at convention. So the intent was, if we move it to a weekend and laymen don't have to take as many days off, maybe we will increase our lay delegate participation, which is what we would want to see. So we've kind of taken some statistics over the last few years, and it doesn't look like the lay representation has increased like we hoped it would. And so the elections committee is going to have to discuss whether or not they want to keep it on a weekend or move it back to the during the week schedule. So if there are thoughts that anybody has on that, from what I have heard from lay delegates, I've heard from most of our lay delegates that it doesn't make any difference if it's on the weekend or during the week. Maybe part of that might depend on your job, but that is a question that is going to come up. And one of the problems that we've had is that people, if it's over a Sunday, for example, this weekend, since convention ends on a Sunday, I'll be gone, Josh will be gone, John will be gone, Wade will be gone. And what that does is it eliminates a lot of individuals to do the service on Sunday morning. So now it's going to be hard. We're going to be talking about this at council. Is there somebody that can do the service on Sunday morning, since not only your pastor and teacher are gone, but you also have some of your laymen who might be willing to do the lay service that are also gone. That makes it harder for the congregation. And it's not just a congregation like ours, but think about smaller congregations where they don't have as many men to be able to serve in that capacity. So that has been a challenge for them as well. So if you do have any thoughts on that, share that with either Wade or John or myself, and let us know if you have any concerns or thoughts regarding the dates or the timing of convention. This will be next year already. So this is basically the 2020 convention. Next year will be the regular 22 convention. So we only get 1 year between conventions between this year and next year. Any other thoughts or questions? We'll stop there. My plan for next week would be to go through committees 5 and 6. That would be the trustees report, or the board of trustees, and membership. There's a couple of things in membership. And then when we get done with that, to be able to go into doctrine, and we would take whatever's left over next week, and then the entire following weekend for the Board of Doctrine report dealing with the joint statement. So if you want to look ahead to the Board of Trustees report, committee number 5 and committee number 6, membership, and if you want to get a jump start on the Board of Doctrine report at the beginning of the prospectus, those are the things that I'm hoping to get into next week. And I don't think there's going to be a lot. Trustees will be fairly short. And membership has a couple of things that there might be some discussion on, but I'm hoping to get a good deal of time into the Board of Doctrine report already next Sunday. And there's a lot of reading. I think they have 30 pages in the prospectus in the Board of Doctrine report, so there's a lot of information in there. Any questions? Yes?
The whole resolution about the call process for professors, which category, are we going to touch on that? Which category are we going to touch on?
That'll be in membership.
Okay.
So membership.
I didn't know if that was regents or not.
No, it's, that was one of the things that is in the regents report,
Right.
but the moderator has given that responsibility to the membership committee, so we will take that up under committee number 6. If you look at the beginning of your prospectus on pages 8 and 9, you have a listing of all of the floor committees. So to John's point, if you look at committee number 2, which is ILC, they have 3 bullets there. The report of the Board of Regents, and then he lays out what those things are. And then the report for the Committee of Partners in Public Ministry, the ILC building proposal. But if you go over to membership on page 9, you have, and they don't have bullet points there, the bullet points are missing, but look at number 5. Proposal, eliminate publicizing the nomination slate for calling professor. So it's under the Board of Membership's purview to deal with that part of the ILC report. And that's what I would anticipate we have some discussion on next week. So you can follow along if you look at that page 9. Next week, we're going to cover the 4 bullets under finance, the 6 bullets under membership and constitution, and then we will back up and take the 3 bullet points, or start on the 3 bullet points under doctrine. And last week I did give the page numbers that for each one of those bullets. If you would like those, let me know and I can give those to you so that it's easier to find in the prospectus where these particular reports are inside this 109-page document. All right, any other thoughts? Let's close then with the blessing and promise of our Lord. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you now and always. Amen.